Hey, everybody. Good morning, Crafting and Crime Daily. Welcome to another episode. This one is live. And we are covering today the trial of Matthew Terry. It is anticipated that the ex-girlfriend, her last name is Rogers, is going to take the stand when they get back from the break. So we're going to cover that live. This is a prior bad act that the judge is allowing the jury to hear. This is where he attacked a girl and spent 3 years in prison for this. Got out, 1 year parole, and then he came to Florida and did it again. So the judge just took the bench. I'm going to put him in the stream. There we go.
Mr. Diaz has indicated to us that he stepped out and asked you whether you had watched any of this trial over the past, I guess, 2 weeks that it's been publicized. And you indicated that you had. Is that correct?
Yes.
Can you tell us what you've seen, where you've seen it, how much of it, this trial, you've seen?
Yes. A couple of days ago, I was searching the case because I had been out of town, so I hadn't seen anything on the case. So when you YouTube it, it'll come up. And so I started watching it, and then apparently it was day 3, which I didn't notice until the defense attorney, she was talking, and then she had brought up can I say what?
Yeah, you absolutely. We need to know everything.
Okay.
I need you to speak up, or if you can adjust the microphone down so that they can hear you.
And then when I saw, I guess it was an art. It was the middle of the statement, and she said that no, that they don't have any proof that he was in the house before during that day, the incident. And then I went. I was there. I was in that house that day, that afternoon. So then I didn't finish watching it because it was already day 3. And then I said, I need to ask my boyfriend. I said, what should I do? I should contact them. It's on statement that I was there when they questioned me before.
So how much in a matter of time, like minutes, hours of testimony you watched?
No, it was only probably about maybe 15 minutes or 20 minutes because I had guests from out of town, and so I wasn't able to watch.
Anything else as far as reading, watching, or anything other than that approximately 15 minutes?
No.
Hi, Rochelle. I don't believe this is the ex-girlfriend, but I could be wrong. But we are expecting her to testify here soon.
Some argument or testimony that no one else was in the house that day, and you realized that you had been in the house that day, and that was in your mind important enough.
No, this is another witness.
Your boyfriend about, and then.
How are you doing, Rochelle? Good morning.
No,
I've had quite the morning myself.
I didn't know who to contact. So then this morning, when
I had to
work, I asked
purchase a new car battery. It's always something, you know.
Find out who I contact.
All right.
And fair warning, I am anticipating a phone call.
The attorneys have any questions, Mr. Diaz?
You just got back from Michigan. Nice.
Ma'am, when you went inside
well, this is the trial of Matthew Terry. He is on trial for stabbing his girlfriend.
What did you observe?
She was murdered.
Is there any damage to the girlfriend?
It is alleged that he committed that
Damage to the
murder.
door?
No.
What we're going to hear
To be
today
clear,
is testimony of a
The home
prior
has 2
girlfriend.
bathrooms, a master bathroom,
This is a
and
Florida
another
case,
bathroom
but
that
he
serves
had a
as
prior
guest bathroom, but
case,
also
a
a
prior
kids' bathroom.
trial
Do you
in
know which
Michigan,
bathrooms you went into?
where he actually stabbed his girlfriend in Michigan, and she survived. She spent 5 days in the
Your memory
ICU.
in
She
any way
survived, and
different
we are
because you saw
expected
what
this
you saw
morning
on
to
TV?
hear her testify.
I mean,
Usually
are
that
you
kind of
saying
testimony is
bathroom
not
wasn't damaged
allowed, but
because
the
you saw it
judge
on
felt
TV
that
and you think that's
in
important
this
somehow?
case, the facts of what
Well,
happened
I
to
think
this
it's
woman were so
important,
similar
yes.
to what happened
You
in
think it's
this
important
case that
case, but I
he
mean,
is allowing this
has that
testimony.
changed you to now say it wasn't? It was?
No.
I have a question.
Now, this woman, I think she just came here to testify that she had been in that home earlier that day.
That you specifically watched anything about whether there was or was not damage to that bathroom, correct?
No.
Okay. so that was something that's.
I have a feeling she was a housekeeper or something. I don't know.
To find one in order to tell them that specific information. And you've since then spoken to other people about what you saw in those 15 minutes, yes?
No. I said, well, I don't know, would clarify that.
Sure, you indicated that you spoke to a friend because you wanted him to find the prosecutor and find out who to talk to, right?
Yes,
Okay, so you talked to other people, and in addition, in regard to what you saw on TV as well as what you believe you recall from that day, correct?
I didn't tell specifics, I just said, who do I contact?
Okay, and additionally on that day, and forgive me, but you had your deposition, you indicated you were having significant trouble remembering because you were intoxicated, correct?
I didn't say I was intoxicated, I had I said I had a couple of drinks, and, I had been drinking. Afterward, yes, when we were at the landings.
Was the question asked of you, and forgive me, but you said a couple times, I don't remember, or I'm not sure. I just want to ask, is there any memory difficulty due to what you consumed that night? And you said yes. Is that correct?
Yes,
Did you indicate not only had you had beer, you had shots as well?
I said I did.
Okay. 1 second, Jeff. Nothing further in that specific regard, Ron.
Anything else from the state?
Ma'am, I'm going to show you a copy of your deposition transcript. Specifically, I'm looking at page 10, the section that starts on line 2. Could you read that paragraph to yourself?
Well, we,
No, not allowed. Can you read it yourself?
oh, okay. Okay.
Can I just read it?
Yeah.
Ma'am, in your deposition, did you indicate when you were talking about the events that you did that day go into the bathroom?
Yes.
I have the question, John.
Does that bring up any additional questions from the defense?
No, Your Honor.
Ma'am, were you ever told not to watch or research anything about the trial?
No.
All right, I'm gonna ask you to step outside. Thank you very much. I appreciate your testimony. I've got to talk to the lawyers. Watch your step.
I don't believe they were in front of the jury just now. They're just trying to see if they're going to allow her to testify. I think this is the woman who was, there was a third woman at the bar that night. There were 3 couples. I think she was part of the third couple at the bar at the landing prior to the stabbing.
All right, she's out.
Judge, not only did they fail to tell a potential witness of theirs not to watch the trial, violating the rule of sequestration, they also then had the specific impact of that specific portion that the witness then watched as a result of them failing to give her that instruction that the court ordered to be given, actually changed her testimony. She indicated she gave testimony at the deposition about going into the bathroom, that she never told anybody anything about seeing the condition of the bathroom, that it wasn't
Was she asked?
any way damaged. She wasn't specifically asked that, but she never gave any indication of that prior to seeing what is on TV, which satisfies the requirement that there be some substantial change in order to prevent her from testifying. Had she not watched it, had they instructed her the way they were supposed to, she would never have changed that testimony, and we wouldn't be in this position now.
Judge, I didn't instruct Ms. Juarez because she wasn't on my list. She was supposed to be on vacation last week when I thought that I would conclude testimony last week. We're only in this because I basically lost a day on Thursday because of the storm. Otherwise, we wouldn't have gotten to this point. I think she would have still been on vacation when I would have rested. So I didn't instruct her because I didn't anticipate calling her. I also, again, I remind the court that I didn't know when this trial started on November 7th what the issue in the trial was going to be. I didn't know if it was going to be somebody else did it or not. I had no reason to think that it was going to be of interest at that moment, that the bathroom door was normal when she went into it. And I think that's consistent with her deposition. She said, I went to the bathroom. She didn't say anything more about it because nothing is unusual about the bathroom at that time. If the door frame had been splintered, I imagine she would have said, I went to the bathroom and I noticed the door frame was all broken, or whatever the case may be. She's basically being called to say she didn't observe the splintering of the door when she went to the bathroom, which is consistent with her testimony effectively. Nobody asked her specifically, was there damage to the bathroom? But
Yep. I'm sorry.
but I think that when a person says I went to the bathroom, they don't make any further observation. They're effectively saying everything was pretty normal. And so I don't think that anything that she's seen on TV has colored her testimony or her testimony. She's saying anything different than she would have otherwise said had she not watched TV or talked to anybody else. But obviously when she did watch TV, she realized that what she knew might be of use, and so she came forward.
That it was disingenuous for them to say that they didn't think the damage to the bathroom door would be an issue. When it was brought up at the Williams Rule hearing, it was brought up in their opening. They had known they were going to try to argue that that somehow indicates an incident inside. And this specific change in testimony is a direct result of them failing to instruct this witness. If they weren't sure, they should have told all of their witnesses, you can't watch it. Every potential witness. They didn't do that, and because they didn't, this one witness has changed her testimony in regard to that specific fact. Exactly what they want her to testify here to.
Let me read to you from section 616.1 of Earhart's Florida Evidence 2022 edition, volume 1 on, obviously, section 616 is the rule of exclusion 9616. And on page 812, I cite the following language. The most extreme remedy, that of disqualification of a witness, may be imposed only after the trial court conducts a hearing and determines that the witness, and this is quoted, the witness acted with the knowledge, consent, procurement, or connivance, end quotation, of the party calling the person as a witness. That would be the state. If the court determines that the rule violation occurred with the knowledge or connivance of a party or counsel, it may then exclude the witness only if it finds that, and this is quoted, the testimony of the challenged witness was substantially affected by the testimony he, it says he, but in this case she, heard, to the extent that, it says his, but I'll change that to her, testimony differed from what it would have been had he or she not heard testimony in violation of the rule. And then it cites, there's a footnote 28, which cites Steinhorst, Steinhorst versus State, 412 Southern 2nd, 332, which is a Florida Supreme Court case in 1982. Anything else from the defense?
412 Southern 2nd, 332.
412 Southern 2nd, 332, yes.
I could have a moment.
And the specific language is on 336, apparently. It also cites, I apologize, Wright, W-R-I-G-H-T versus State, 473 Southern 2nd, 1277, which is a Florida 1985 Supreme Court decision. And as I read the footnote, there's a list of other district court opinions cited. Take a look at them just to see the other sides on the footnote, because they get more specifics, but you can see if there's anything.
I think if the judge allows this woman to testify, it's going to delay us from hearing the ex-girlfriend for a little bit, but I think it's important testimony that she testified that the bathroom was in perfect condition when she used it the day prior to the murder, or that day prior to the murder. I believe, like I said, this is a woman who was at the landing. There were
Judge,
3
that
couples at the
case
landing. I think she was one of those 3
specifically
couples.
in the case law that it cites when it's a violation to exclude a defense witness. I understand the argument, I understand the language, but when you're talking about the knowledge and connivance of the state, you have some sense into that which they maybe knew or connived.
Let's assume that there is. I mean, the second part of what I read says, if you find the connivance, then you can only exclude if their testimony would be different.
Correct, and her testimony is different. She indicated during the course of going in, saying absolutely nothing about the supposed damage. Watching that 15 minutes is what specifically changed her thought of, oh, I better call and say it was damage. Had she never seen that, she would never be changing that which was said.
I don't disagree with that, and you have my attention there, but she wasn't asked in the deposition. It's not like she said there was no damage and now or there was damage and now she says that there wasn't damage. That is my idea of a change in testimony. I hear you, though, that she never even would have thought about it had she not, and the state would not have known. Anything else?
And the imputation of knowledge to the state is that they have to inform all of their potential witnesses. They made the strategic choice not to, probably because she said during her deposition that she was intoxicated. And that choice is something that they have to live with. They didn't inform her. She violated the rule. Now it substantially changes what she would have said otherwise and prejudices the defendant.
But we're past that. Even if they intentionally violated the rule, that doesn't automatically mean that it doesn't come in. It only means if the testimony is different. That's the only reason that you exclude. That's an extreme remedy to exclude a witness. It's only done in rare circumstances.
And it is changed. Her omittance of that information is a material change to what she's now claiming occurred, that she never told anyone before when she couldn't remember what happened because she was drunk that day.
That the court had about the witness acting with the knowledge, consent, procurement, or connivance of the party calling the person as a witness. It references a case. I think it says suggesting or a witness may be disqualified and recognize that it is, quote, a matter most difficult of proof, end quote. This requirement is justified because, quote, often a prospective witness will be confused and will not understand what the court said, or he may come into the courtroom after the court has made its order. Counsel is often so busy and intent on trial problems that he will not be aware that one of his witnesses is in the courtroom. This possibility of confusion is one reason that courts are sometimes reluctant to order witnesses not to speak to each other. They inadvertently do from time to time, and then the trial degenerates only into ugly accusations of bad faith that becloud the central issues. The courts have similarly been hesitant the testimony of Tacoma versus State, 730 Southern 2nd, 769, first DCA case out of 1999.
It doesn't matter. That's no longer my concern.
Well, the state takes issue with the description of the testimony has changed. Again,
I don't believe it's changed.
right, and if the state testimony hasn't changed, I don't believe there's a basis for exclusion to be the proper remedy.
I don't think that the law requires exclusion. Is that the judge, when you said you weren't calling her, you made a decision not to call her. And then I don't remember what I said, but somehow I reopened that door. And as a result, I'm not allowing you to call her. Sorry. All right, get the jury. Lunch break around. You know, I'll go to 12, 15, 20. Let's see where we're at. Do you think you'll finish with this witness in?
No.
Okay, that's fine. Then we'll wait. Is this her?
Yes.
No, hold on. We'll take her out please, until the jury is. Bring her in after the jury is seated. Sorry about that. She can wait right in the vestibule there.
All right, jury in courtroom.
Jury is present and seated. Everyone else may be seated at this time. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, welcome back. I know the break was a little longer than we expected. Again, I take full responsibility for any delays, and I hold that against the attorneys, the parties, or anyone else. If you're upset that you had a long break, you can hold that against me. The plan is still the same, though, that we'll break for lunch probably between 12:15 and 12:20. So that's the plan. I'm going to ask the state to now call their next witness.
State calls Alyssa Troutman.
Alyssa Troutman. Ms. Troutman, good morning and welcome. If you'll please, wherever you're comfortable, raise your right hand. Thank you. Do you swear affirm any testimony you give in this proceeding will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
Thank you, ma'am. If you'll follow the bailiff down to the ramp that leads up to the witness chair, please watch your step. When you get to that seat, go ahead, have a seat, make yourself comfortable. That microphone in front of you is fully adjustable.
Good morning, ma'am. If you would, please introduce yourself to the jury.
My name is Alyssa Troutman.
Ms. Troutman, what do you do for a living?
I work for the Florida Department of Law Enforcement. I'm a crime laboratory analyst.
And do you work a particular section of the crime lab at FDLE?
I work in the biology section.
Does the biology section handle the analysis of suspected items that might contain potential DNA?
It handles items that contain possible body fluids and performs DNA analysis.
So are you one of the people who does potential DNA analysis of items?
Yes, I do.
All right, well, let's talk about that. I assume you didn't just walk out of high school and become a DNA analyst. Do you have to go to school after high school?
Yes, I have a Bachelor of Science in Forensic Science from the University of New Haven, and that included coursework in molecular biology, biochemistry, and genetics.
So you obtain your science degree, and then do you just become a DNA analyst, or how does it work?
At FDLE, I went through a couple different trainings. One was a 3-month training program. I started as a forensic technologist. The second was also as a forensic technologist, where I studied serology and how it relates to forensic cases. And then the third was about a 9-month training program for a DNA analyst.
And when did you finish your 9-month training program to become a DNA analyst?
In September of 2013.
And have you been working in that same capacity then as a DNA analyst since 2013?
Yes, I have.
So that's, I don't know, 8.5, 9 years?
Yes.
Now, you talked about serology, and obviously we're talking about DNA. Do you receive specific training and education on those particular topics in furtherance of your job?
Yes, I received training in forensic serology as it pertains to criminal cases. It is the study of body fluids with criminal investigations.
As part of your job in doing DNA analysis, do you have to also use statistics?
Yes, I do.
So you talked about a science degree. Do you have training in mathematics as well, or at least statistics?
I have training in statistics as it relates to my job. So I went through a couple different trainings while I was learning about statistics for my DNA analyst program and afterwards.
All right. So if I needed you to do trigonometry, you might not be the person to call, but you at least know how to do statistics.
I know how to do statistics, yes.
Okay. So you became a DNA analyst somewhere 9 years ago. In an average day or average week or month, whatever block of time is easiest for you, tell me how many items of evidence do you potentially analyze or review for possible DNA evidence?
Each week can vary. It can vary from maybe 2 to 3 items to 10 to 15 items. It just depends on the type of cases and how many items are submitted at the time.
It'd be fair to say that, I mean, you average somewhere about 5 a week.
Possibly. Not each week is the same. Sometimes I'm needed in court, and other times I'm needed for different training. So it might not be 5 a week, but on average, maybe 5 to 15 a week.
Doing a couple times a year.
It's probably fair to say.
Okay. So once you became an analyst, you got the job and you've been on the job, do they test you from time to time to make sure you still know how to do the job correctly?
Yes, I am proficiency tested twice a year.
And have you passed your proficiency testing?
Yes, I have.
Have you ever been called to court to testify for an expert opinion in the areas of serology or DNA analysis?
Yes, I have.
And as part of that, have you ever been asked to render an expert opinion also as to statistics related to the DNA analysis?
Yes.
Can you give me an idea of how many times you think you've done that?
In court in general, I've probably gone about 40 times. Statistics, maybe about 30 times. There was a time where I was only working serology cases, so that wouldn't involve statistics.
Your Honor, at this time, I tender the witness for voir dire.
Any questions? No questions. You may proceed.
Ma'am, I want to talk with you first about FDLE as a whole unit, or at least the place you work here in Tampa. Is the lab accredited?
Yes, it is.
Can you explain what it means to be an accredited lab?
Accreditation means we are meeting a set of standards that are put forward by an outside agency to ensure quality work product is being done at the lab.
And the outside agency that sets the guidelines or reviews your accreditation, who is that?
That it is called ANAB, or the American National Standards Institute National Accreditation Board.
And is this a nationally recognized agency to accredit forensic laboratories?
Yes, it is.
Beyond the accreditation, well, first of all, I guess, is FDLE still accredited?
Yes.
And has it been accredited throughout the year of 2022?
Yes.
Beyond the standards that are set for accreditation and all the things that the lab has to do to maintain accreditation, do you have internal policies like technical review to make sure that just inside the day-to-day work, you're doing it right?
Objection. Approach, please.
Sure.
I have no idea what that objection's all about. It's a routine question.
So you talked about a variety of topics. Let's talk about serology. You said it has to do with bodily fluids. Can you explain that a little more in depth?
Forensic serology is a study of body fluids in accordance with criminal investigations.
And what kind of body fluids are we talking about?
FDLE examines items for the possible presence of blood, semen, and saliva.
And can you just explain how one determines whether or not there is the presence of blood, semen, or saliva, just as sort of an initial inquiry?
So blood and semen are a similar kind of test where it's testing for a chemical that is present within the two. They are separate tests. So specifically when I'm testing for blood, I take a small sample of it with a cotton swab. I apply some chemicals, and if it changes color to a pink color, I know it's a positive result. And if it doesn't change color, it's a negative result. The semen test is very similar. So if it changes color with the specific chemicals for semen, it is a positive result. If it changes color, negative is no color change.
And do you know the phrases presumptive and confirmatory?
Yes, I do.
Can you explain what the differences are?
Presumptive test is testing for the possible presence of a component within those items. So like I talked about for blood, if there is a chemical present and it reacts with the chemicals that I am testing, that is a presumptive test. A confirmatory test is to confirm a possible blood, semen, or saliva present. So there is a test for blood, and the test for confirmatory test for semen is identifying sperm cells within a sample that is taken.
So you could do a presumptive test, get a result, and then you could go further and do a confirmatory test?
You can, yes.
Now let's talk about DNA, because we talked about serology. What is DNA? Where does it come from? What does it have to do with forensics cases? Tell me about those things.
So DNA stands for deoxyribonucleic acid. It is the building blocks of life. It is inherited. So you get half of your DNA from your mom and half from your dad. Over 99% of DNA is the same among individuals. It's within that 1% that I am doing my testing. No two people other than identical twins are known to have the same DNA. DNA is it's contained within the nucleus of cells.
So when you talk about 99% of DNA is the same, is that why, for example, you and I both have a pair of eyes, a nose located in the center of our face, a pair of ears, arms, legs, those sorts of things?
Yes, it codes for how people look as well as different functions within the body.
But then obviously there is something in your DNA that's different from my DNA, and that's what makes you, you, and me, for example.
Yes, it is.
And does DNA change?
DNA cannot change among people, no.
So whether I'm 440 or 400, my DNA is arguably the same.
Yes, it would be.
So you talk about DNA and that you can analyze DNA. Is this only done in criminal cases, or does it have non-criminal case uses?
DNA has many different uses. Instead of just being criminal cases, it's done in medical testing. It also can be done in paternity testing, as well as genealogy testing.
Is it used for reasons other than just people? I mean, can you use it for like agriculture, for example?
I think there is different studies on there on plant DNA as well as animal DNA too.
Okay. So now we know what DNA is. It's this thing we get from our parents and it makes us somewhat unique. How do you analyze it? What is the procedure by which one can analyze DNA? So
the type of DNA testing I'm performing is called STRs, or short tandem repeats. I'm looking at how many times a particular sequence is repeated among the DNA at the different areas I'm testing. So the overall process on how I do that is I have to get the DNA out of the cells. So I apply heat and chemicals in order to break those cells open to get the DNA out. I have to see how much DNA is present, perform a test that will do that, because our tests work well within a specific range. If I put too much in, I'm not going to get a good reading. And if I put not enough in, I'm not going to get a good reading. So it works best in a specific amount. Then I take it through a process which will highlight all the different areas of the DNA I'm testing. After that, I put it through an instrument that will read those highlights, and it will correlate to your DNA types at the different areas. So it all boils down to looking at a specific set of numbers. So you could be a 10-11 or a 10-10, which would just mean your DNA types at that area. and it just means how many times your DNA sequence is repeated at that area.
And so is this the commonly or widely accepted procedure in the field of DNA analysis for analyzing DNA, this short tandem repeat analysis?
Yes, it is.
So you talk about looking at particular areas. Are those areas called alleles?
The areas are called loci.
And do they involve alleles?
The DNA type, so your types at those areas are called alleles.
All right. And so you talk about loci. Is there a specific number of loci that we're currently looking at in DNA testing?
Currently, FDLE is looking at 21 different STR areas plus some gender markers.
And if we rewound the clock 5 or 10 or 15 years, that number would have been less, I assume?
Yes, it was.
So right now you can do 21 plus 3 for gender.
Yes.
And so you have 21 loci plus 3 for gender. So that's 24 total areas. Are those all loci or just 21 loci and then the 3 for gender?
There's 24 loci or areas.
Right, so now we have 24 loci, and at each of those loci, there are these things called alleles. Can you explain what that is?
The alleles are your DNA types at those areas.
So when you talk about like a 10-10 or an 11-10, those are pairs of numbers.
Yes.
Do your alleles pair?
Your alleles do pair, yes. So it could be the same number or 2 different numbers at that area.
So when you're looking at a particular loci 1, for example, I don't know if that's the correct name for it, but the first loci, you might see 11-10. 11 is one half of the pair, 10 is the other half.
Yes.
Now, when you look at DNA and you're looking at these loci and you have all of these alleles represented by numbers, what can you then do with that information?
So once I get the overall DNA result, I then make a conclusion as to what it is. So I could have a complete DNA profile, which would mean information at all the areas, a partial DNA profile, which would mean I'm missing some. I could have a DNA mixture, or I could have no DNA results or too limited amount of DNA in order to do anything with. And then I can make comparisons to any knowns within the case.
All right, so you covered a whole bunch of stuff there. You talked about a complete DNA profile. So the jury's already heard the concept of a buccal swab. Somebody comes and uses a Q-tip, basically takes some of my DNA from the inside of my mouth. You could then run that through your procedure and figure out my numbers for all of those 24 locations.
Yes.
And that would be a complete DNA profile.
Yes, it would.
If for some reason the sample was incomplete, 18 of the 24, you would call it.
Yes, if there is not full information at all the areas, it would be a partial profile.
And you talked about a mixture. What is a mixture?
The DNA mixture is DNA from more than one person. So since we know how DNA behaves and what it looks like, I can tell the difference between DNA from one person versus DNA from more than one person.
And can you even be definitive enough or at least get a pretty good idea of how many people are in a mixture, whether it's 2 or 3 or 20?
Not quite 20, but I can tell the difference between 1, 2, 3, and potentially 4, depending on what the DNA looks like.
All right. And so once you have this information, I submit to you some item. I'm going to pretend my folder is an item I submit to you, and you swab it, you collect it, you run it through the system, you process it, you get a bunch of numbers, the 24 locations. Now you have that information. If you're provided a known sample from a person, can you then compare the results of the known sample against the suspected sample to see if there is some sort of agreement or correlation?
I can make a comparison to any knowns within the case from the question samples.
And so can you determine if, for example, 2 DNA samples, a known one and an unknown one, are a match?
Yes, I can.
If the unknown sample has a mixture, meaning there's 2 or more contributors to the mixture, can you decide if the known sample is at least one of the contributors to the mixture?
I can make a comparison, and if the DNA types are present within the mixture from the known, they would be included to that sample as a possible contributor.
And so is the term included different than a match?
Yes, it is.
Do you only use a match when it's a single source?
Yes, that's the terminology that's used when it's single sources match.
Now, let me give you a hypothetical. Let's pretend that I had here floating in the air a known sample, and you had a complete profile of somebody's DNA. You had the numbers for all 24 locations, okay? And then I gave you another unknown sample, and we put it here floating in the air as well, and you had the numbers at all 24 locations. And at 23 of the locations, the numbers are exactly the same in every way. And then we get to the 24th location, and one is a 10-10, and the other one is an 11-10. What would that mean for you?
Well, is it the same profile?
Well, what I'm trying to get to is, you know the phrase an exclusion?
Yes.
What's an exclusion?
An exclusion means when the DNA isn't the same between the two.
And so does it have to be, they have to agree at all 24 locations, or can you disagree at just one?
All of the areas have to match in order for it to be a match. So the DNA types between a question and an unknown sample have to be the same. If there is any sort of issue between the two that don't correlate with each other and aren't the same, it would be an exclusion.
So if one loci does not match, you would exclude a person as a contributor in a mixture, for example?
Typically, if it's more than one, it should be more than one loci. There's a very rare circumstance when it's not, but it would be an exclusion if the DNA types weren't present.
So you talk about analyzing submitted items that possibly contain DNA. How does FDLE receive those items, and what precautions do they take to secure those items to make sure they're not tampered with?
So when an agency comes to submit items to FDLE, they're taken in by our evidence department. They are given a unique FDLE case number as well as item number. All the items that come in are sealed, and they are insured to make sure no one has touched them once they come into FDLE. The chain of custody is then kept as well.
And once it's in FDLE's lab and you've taken all the steps to maintain the chain of custody, at some point it is turned over to you, correct?
Yes, it is.
What steps do you personally take to make sure that you're not contaminating the substance with either your own DNA or one of your coworkers or whatever the case may be?
So when I'm working on any items, I'm wearing a lab coat, a face mask, a hairnet if it is needed, as well as gloves, and I change my gloves frequently. I clean down the area that I'm working on with a soapy solution. I then use a piece of paper to open the items on. I take my notes and then do any of my analysis. And when I'm done with it, I seal it back up and put it in my locker that I have access to. And then once that's done, it is returned to the agency.
And is that the process, the procedure you follow in all cases where you're analyzing DNA?
Yes, it is.
Now, we've talked about what DNA is, how you can analyze it, what you can determine with it potentially, but we haven't gotten to statistics. So how does statistics play in all of this?
So when I'm making any sort of comparisons, I am providing a statistic if the statistic is a match or a inclusion. The statistics are also done to show if someone is excluded from a sample.
And how do you do the statistic? Do you have to refer to some database or something?
The statistic is done with use of a database that have the DNA types and how those were seen within a particular sample set, and those are used within the calculations when I do my statistics.
Do you know what a likelihood ratio is?
Yes.
And what is a likelihood ratio?
The likelihood ratio is the statistic that I use at FDLE to make my comparisons. It is just a comparison of two different hypotheses.
Do you all have a number or a sort of a cap as to where you will cap the likelihood ratio generally when reporting it?
So sometimes when we're dealing with statistics, the numbers are very large. And so in my reporting, if the number is larger than greater than 700 billion, I'm going to cap it at greater than 700 billion. That is a number FDLE chose to be a bit more tangible, because when you start getting into these larger numbers, in my opinion, they kind of sound made up. So 700 billion is something everyone can kind of grasp their head around.
All right. Submitted not a mixture, like a bubble sample, and then you have an unsample, and that turns out to be a single source as well. You could determine whether or not that is a match, correct?
Yes.
Would you assign a likelihood ratio in that situation since it's only one person?
Yes, I would assign a likelihood ratio since it's a match.
If it's a mixture, right, you have a buccal sample from a known person, and now you have some other object that you're testing to see what the DNA says there, and it turns out to be a mixture, do you assign a likelihood ratio to that?
Yes.
And so you talk about capping it at 700 billion times more likely than? Is that the correct phrasing?
It's greater than 700 billion.
And so if, just hypothetically, you had a object and you determine that this object is a mixture of suspected blood, you perform your DNA analysis and you're able to get results out of it, and you compare it to a buccal sample, would you say something like the chances of it being the defendant and someone else is greater than 700 billion times more likely? Is that something you might perhaps say?
The terminology is a little bit different. It's given the observed DNA profile of the sample, it is greater than 700 billion times more likely to be whoever I'm comparing. And if it's a two-person, it'd be whoever I'm comparing and an unknown individual versus two unknown individuals.
Now, we talk about these really big numbers. Is this something that you can do with a computer, without a computer? How does that work?
It can be done with or without a computer.
Do you generally use a computer?
Yes, because it is easier and faster to use a computer.
All right. I want to ask you about the process by which items are submitted to FDLE for evaluation. Is there generally a limit or a number by which items can be submitted?
Yes, there is a limit based on the different case type.
And so what is that number generally at for DNA and for like violent crime?
It depends on the violent crime. So in particular, a death investigation, it's 5 items that are unknown, and any number of buccal samples can be submitted to the lab as well.
And so your lab, FDLE, covers a portion of Florida. What portions do you cover?
I forget how many counties, but it's the surrounding counties of Hillsborough. And then we also help out some of our other regions as well. So I can be doing work from anywhere within the state.
But it's counties like Pinellas and Polk and Pasco and Manatee, like that surrounding counties?
Yes.
All right. And so are there labs that cover other portions of the state, like the Panhandle area and down in South Florida and up around Jacksonville?
Yes, there are other FDLE labs as well as different county labs.
And do all the labs have that same sort of general rule, that sort of provision of you can submit 5 items?
The FDLE labs do. I'm not sure about the other county labs.
So let me talk with you about the analysis you performed in this case. I'm going to first approach you and show you 2 items. Exhibit number 62, which just so the jury can see it before I put it up there. This is State's Exhibit 62, which on the packaging says blood standard card of K. Baker. And then this is State's Exhibit 63, buccal swab taken from Matthew Terry. I'd like you to take a look at these items and tell me if you recognize these items as items you've previously performed work on.
Yes, they are.
And how do you recognize them as items that you've performed work on previously?
They have the unique FDLE barcode as well as my handwriting, date, and initials on it as well, and my seals.
And you place those things on there when you're either doing the work or shortly after you're done?
Yes.
And anything about, other than the fact that somebody has already taken the time to cut the packages open, anything about anything there suggests to you that there's somehow been some sort of tampering or anything with the packaging?
Other than the openings, no.
If I could retrieve those. So let's start with State's Exhibit number 62. You talked about a whole process of where you use a cotton swab, you collect a sample, you use heat and chemicals, you extract the DNA, you make copies, all those sorts of things that you talked about. Is that one of the things that you would have done here? Is that the process and procedure you would have done for this particular item?
Yes, it is.
And having done that, what, if anything, can you tell us about this particular item, item number 60 or exhibit number 62?
I obtained a complete DNA profile from the bloodstain card from K. Baker.
All right. And so that means you have information, the pair of numbers for all 24 locations for K. Baker. Is that correct?
Yes, I have complete information at all of the areas I'm testing.
Now I'm going to show you State's Exhibit number 63. Again, did you go through that same procedure of you and running it through the instrument to determine the numbers?
Yes, I performed the same analysis.
And were you able to obtain a complete DNA profile for this particular sample, which is listed as the buccal swab taken from the defendant?
I obtained a complete DNA profile from the buccal swabs from Matthew Terry.
Is it that information you would need or can get, at least at the moment, scientifically, to then perform to see if either of these two persons' DNA is in another object?
I have all the information I would need in order to make comparisons.
So I'm going to start with items number 31 and 32. Take a look at these if you need to and tell me if you recognize them as objects you previously performed work on.
Yes, I do.
And again, do you recognize them by the lab number and the writing and the date and all of that?
Yes, they have our unique FDLE barcode, a case number, date, and initials that are mine that I wrote on there in my seals.
Anything about them suggests that they've somehow been tampered with or some sort of hanky-panky's been going on?
Not since after I touched them.
All right, if I could retrieve them. So I want to start with exhibit number 31, which on the packaging says right fingernail clippings from K. Baker. Were you able to perform the process that you've already outlined a couple times, just as you did with the bloodstain card and the buccal sample from the defendant?
Yes, I was able to do the same process.
And having done that, were you able to obtain results that would allow you to then tell us about what may or may not be in this item?
Yes.
So let's start off with, can you tell me, is this an item that comes from a single source of DNA, or is this a mixture?
This was a single source profile, and I obtained a complete DNA profile from item 11.
All right, and so when you obtain a complete DNA profile, you can then potentially reach a match if you have the right person's DNA, correct?
If they do match, yes.
Now, before you even get to whether it's a match or not, just looking at this item and the results that generated, does it give you any indication as to whether or not the single source is a female or a male?
It was consistent with a female individual.
And so then tell me about, were you able to identify whose DNA, were you able to make a match on this item?
So the language is a little bit different. Since this was an item that was taken from a person, I'm able to expect their DNA to be present. So I obtained a complete DNA profile from my item 11, which would be K. Baker's right hand fingernail clippings and nail clipper. I collected a sample. K. Baker was expected to be a donor since that item did come from her, and no DNA results foreign to K. Baker were found on her right hand fingernail clippings.
And I want to talk about that. As to her right fingernail clippings, there's nothing in the analysis that you performed that suggested that somebody else's DNA is under her right hand, correct?
It was a complete DNA profile that she was expected to be a donor. Nothing foreign was obtained.
So let's look at State's Exhibit number 32, which is the left fingernails. Again, did you perform the same process and procedure for this?
Yes, I did.
Were you able to obtain results that you could then interpret?
Yes.
For this number 32, was this a single source or was this a mixture?
This was demonstrated the presence of a mixture consistent with 2 donors, including at least 1 male contributor.
And let me stop you there. You said consistent with. Can you say for sure that it's only 2 people?
The DNA results I obtained were consistent with 2 people.
All right. It doesn't give you any reason to suspect a third person.
I had no indication of a third person, which is why the language is consistent with 2 donors.
All right. So you got 2 people's DNA here in a mixture, and one of them is male. Is that correct?
There is at least 1 male contributor. I can't say how many males are present.
Fair enough. Did you look to see if K. Baker was one of them?
Since this is another item that was taken from K. Baker, I was able to expect her to be a donor to that item.
You would expect her own DNA to be on her own fingernails?
Yes.
Did you look to see then if the DNA profile that comes from the defendant's buccal swab was in any way consistent or matches or include whatever the word is as it relates to number 32?
I did make a comparison from Matthew Terry's buccal swab to the mixture that was obtained from the left-hand fingernails, and Matthew Terry was included as a possible contributor to the mixed DNA profile.
Since you got a inclusion, do you then proceed to the next step and do statistical analysis to come up with a likelihood ratio?
Yes, I perform a statistic.
And so in your report, how did you reflect it?
The observed mixed DNA profile, which would be the left-hand fingernails, is greater than 700 billion times more likely to occur if the sample originated from K. Baker and Matthew Terry than from K. Baker and an unrelated individual.
All right, and you said it's greater than 700 billion. Do you actually, in this case, have the number?
I do have the number, yes.
So can you tell us what the actual likelihood ratio is that it's K. Baker and the defendant as opposed to K. Baker and someone else?
The actual number is 160 quadrillion.
All right, people have probably never heard of a quadrillion, so let me just make sure. We got million, billion, trillion, and then we get to quadrillion?
Yes.
160 quadrillion times more likely, or greater than, I guess it's 160 times more likely if it was K. Baker and the defendant as opposed to K. Baker and anyone else.
The observed mixed DNA profile is greater than 700 billion times more likely to occur if the sample originated from K. Baker and Matthew Terry than from K. Baker and an unrelated individual.
All right, so that's those. I want to now talk with you about State's Exhibit number 33. Again, take a look at it. Tell me if you recognize it as an item you performed analysis on.
Yes, it is.
Again, it's got the lab number, your handwriting, all those sorts of things.
Yes, it does.
Anything about it suggest it's been contaminated or tampered with?
No, other than the opening.
All right, I'll take that one back. Did you perform the same process and procedure on Exhibit 33?
Yes, I did.
For purposes of the jury, so they can keep track, this is labeled swab of K. Baker's neck. Tell us what, if any, results you obtained from this.
I tested it for the possible indications for blood, and I, using a color change test, it did give the chemical indications for blood. And then I obtained a mixture from the swab from K. Baker's neck. And since she was expected to be a donor, she was included and observed in that mixture. Sorry. The DNA results, there were DNA results foreign to K. Baker obtained on item 10, but due to the limited nature of those, I couldn't make any interpretations.
All right, so you know that there's somebody's DNA is on this that's not K. Baker. You just cannot tell us who in any respect. Is that fair to say?
Right, it was too limited to do anything with.
Now, I want to ask you a question. Beyond blood, semen, and saliva, do people also potentially leave DNA by touching things? Can you have what's called touch DNA?
Yes, it would be the touch DNA would be the shedding of skin cells when you touch something.
When you're talking about DNA that comes from blood as opposed to DNA from touch DNA, is one more likely to reach better results or provide a greater quantity when you're trying to analyze it?
Usually DNA that is from body fluids will give a much higher DNA result than something when it's just touched.
All right. So all we can say is that somebody's DNA is on K. Baker's neck, but we don't know who.
I cannot make any interpretations
And
from that.
Because it's limited and not interpretable, can you even tell if it's a man?
I cannot make any interpretations based on what I obtained.
I want to turn your attention now to marker, well, this is State's Exhibit number 50. I'm going to give you that. While you look at that, I'm going to grab something over here. Sorry, give me 1 second. I'm trying to hunt down the right one.
Certainly.
Ma'am, do you recognize that from the lab number and your handwriting and the date and all of those things?
Yes, it is.
Anything about it appears that it's been tampered with or molested since you last had it?
It doesn't appear to be.
All right, well, I can't find the photo at the moment, but what can you tell us about this item that you analyzed?
So that item is my item number 4, which would be the swabs from the red stain on the front porch of 6209. I tested it for the possible presence of blood, and using that color change test, it did give chemical indications for blood. And I obtained a complete DNA profile consistent with a female individual from this item. And that DNA profile matched the DNA profile from Kay Baker.
All right, so this packaging is marked as green DD. You have no idea what that means, correct?
I do not.
But whatever green DD is at this particular area that is swabbed, which says the front, the stain on the front porch at green DD, you found that this was Kay Baker's DNA?
The DNA profile from that swab matched the DNA profile from Kay Baker.
Anybody else's DNA?
It matched Kay Baker's DNA.
So it's a single source. There's nobody else. This isn't a mixture?
Correct. It's single source.
Next, I want to turn to I'm going to show you State's Exhibit number 46. Yes, 46. No, sorry. PD number 48. Do you recognize that?
Yes, I do.
Again, same lab number, handwriting, all of those things.
Yes.
Anything about it appear to have been tampered with or molested?
No.
All right, so I'm going to show you what is marked on the packaging of States 48 as green BB, swab from the east side. Is this one of the items that you analyzed?
Yes, it is.
What can you tell us about this particular item?
This item gave the chemical indications for the presence of blood. The DNA results obtained from item 8, the swabs from the east side of 6209, demonstrated the presence of a mixture consistent with 2 donors, including at least 1 male contributor. I then compared the DNA from Kay Baker and Matthew Terry, and Kay Baker was included as a possible contributor to the mixture obtained from item 8, and Matthew Terry was also included as a possible contributor from item 8.
All right, so this is a mixture?
Yes.
And again, did you say it's consistent with 2 donors?
Yes, it is.
And one of them appears to be, at least one of them appears to be male,
There's at least 1 male individual.
but Kay Baker is included as a possible contributor, and assuming she's female, we can draw conclusions from that. But then the defendant, is he included as the other possible contributor?
He's included as a possible contributor to the mixture.
Now I'm going to draw your attention to State's Exhibit 46. Do you recognize that one?
Yes, I do.
And is that another object that you performed analysis on?
Yes, it is.
It's got your handwriting and the date in the lab.
Yes.
Anything about it appeared to have been tampered with.
No, it doesn't.
All right, I'm going to retrieve that from you. Ma'am, just very briefly, I'm not going to ask you any questions. I just want to give the jury a chance to see a couple pictures. State's Exhibit 41D and State's Exhibit 41E. And then I'm going to now show the jury State's Exhibit 41J that has this green R evidence marker on it. So, ma'am, turning back to State's Exhibit number 40.
Item 7.
Green R swab from red stain along 6211.
Yes, I was able to obtain DNA results from that item.
All right, and so did this give the chemical indication for blood?
It did give the chemical indications for the presence of blood.
Were you able to obtain a complete DNA profile from this particular item?
I obtained a complete DNA profile from item 7, and it was consistent with a female individual, and that DNA profile matched the DNA profile from Kay Baker.
And again, is this a situation where you were able to assign a likelihood ratio?
Yes, it was.
And what was the likelihood ratio as it relates to this item?
The observed DNA profile is greater than 700 billion times more likely to occur if the sample originated from Kay Baker than an unrelated individual.
And this is not a mixture, correct?
It is not a mixture, no, single source.
I'm going to next draw your attention to 47 and 49. We'll start with 49. You can look at 47 while I'm here. Try and cut down the number of trips. Again, do you recognize both of those?
Yes, I do.
And are those items that you previously performed work on?
Yes, they are.
Do they have the lab number, your handwriting, and the date so that you can identify them as items that you previously performed work on?
Yes, they do.
Anything about them appear to have been tampered or molested?
No.
I'm going to look at State's Exhibit number 49 first. This one is marked as green CC, swab of red stain from the front of the west fence. And just while you're looking at your notes real quick, I'm going to show the jury State's Exhibit number 41N and 41Q. Were you able to perform analysis on this item?
Yes, I was.
Did it give chemical indications for the presence of blood?
It did give chemical indications for the presence of blood.
As to the west fence on 6209 CC?
Yes, the stain on the west fence.
And what can you tell us about that?
The DNA results obtained from that item, it's my item 3, demonstrated the presence of a mixture consistent with 2 donors, including at least 1 male contributor.
Ma'am, I'm sorry. I think for purposes of the item, this is marked as 942435, number 34.
Oh, sorry, that's my item 9.
Yeah, there's another one on the fence we're going to get to shortly. That's
Okay, I apologize. So the results obtained from item 9, they failed to give chemical indications for the presence of blood. So once that happened, I didn't perform any other analysis on that item.
If it's not blood, there's no reason to suspect that it would be DNA. Is that fair to say?
Correct.
So now I want to look at the other fence one. This is 942435, number 26, which is marked on the packaging of State's Exhibit 47 as green U, swab of red stain on the north side of the fence. If I could just have 1 second. I'm going to show the jury State's Exhibit number 42S. So as to State's Exhibit 47, marked as green U, swab of the north side of the fence, did this give indications for the presence of blood?
My item 3, the swab from the stain on side of the fence, gave chemical indications for the presence of blood.
Can you tell us if this is a mixture or a single source?
The DNA results obtained from item 3 demonstrated the presence of a mixture consistent with 2 donors, including at least 1 male contributor.
Was Kay Baker included as a possible contributor on the State's Exhibit number 47?
Kay Baker was included as a possible contributor to the mixed DNA profile obtained from the swab from the red stain on side of fence.
And did you assign a likelihood ratio to it being K. Baker on this particular swab?
I did assign a likelihood ratio, and the observed mixed DNA profile is greater than 700 billion times more likely to occur if the sample originated from K. Baker and one unrelated individual than from two unrelated individuals.
All right, so we got K. Baker as one of the suspected contributors. Did you find another contributor that you could identify or provide any information on?
I compared the DNA profile from Matthew Terry to the swab from the side of the fence.
And was he included as a possible contributor to the mixture that is consistent with two people?
Matthew Terry was included as a possible contributor to the mixed DNA profile obtained from item 3.
And did you assign a likelihood ratio that Matthew Terry would have been the contributor?
I did assign a likelihood ratio, and that result was the observed mixed DNA profile is greater than 700 billion times more likely to occur if the sample originated from Matthew Terry and an unrelated individual than from two unrelated individuals.
All right. I'm now going to turn your attention to State's Exhibit 45. Take a look at that one. You recognize that?
Yes, I do.
Is that another item you performed analysis on?
Yes, I did.
Does it again contain your lab number, your handwritten initials, and date?
Yes, it
It
does.
appear to have been molested, tampered with, or contaminated.
No, it doesn't.
I want to draw your attention then. Oh, I need to take that back from you, sorry. I'm sure the jury would like to see it. This is State's Exhibit 45, which on the packaging is labeled Green J swab from red stain in the backyard. I'm going to show you, I'm going to show the jury State's Exhibit 43. This is N, and also State Exhibit 43J. So as to State's Exhibit number 45, what can you tell us about this particular item?
Is that my item 2?
It is swab of red stain in the backyard of 6207 942 435-15.
I tested it for the possible presence of blood, and it did give chemical indications for the presence of blood. A complete DNA profile consistent with a male was obtained from item 2.
Does that mean that this is a single source?
This is a single source profile.
This is DNA from one male and one male only. Were you able to analyze this against the complete DNA profile obtained from the buccal sample of the defendant?
Yes, I was.
And what can you tell us about it?
The DNA profile obtained from item 2 matched the DNA profile from Matthew Terry.
And what is the likelihood ratio attributed to this particular item that you have now said is a match to the defendant?
The observed DNA profile is greater than 700 billion times more likely to occur if the sample originated from Matthew Terry than an unrelated individual.
And I suppose logic would answer it, but just to be clear, since it's a single source and it's Matthew Terry, this means that you can exclude K. Baker as being the person whose DNA this is?
I did exclude K. Baker from that item.
I'm going to show you State's Exhibit number 52. We're almost there. State's Exhibit number 52. Do you recognize this?
Yes, I do.
And is this, again, another item you performed work on?
Yes, it is.
Does it have your lab number and your initials and the date?
Yes, it does.
Anything about it suggests it's been tampered?
No, it doesn't.
And I'm going to briefly put up for a second State's Exhibit 44A. Now I'm going to show the jury's exhibit number 52. this is referenced as leaves with possible blood from red marker. Did you obtain results from this item that were interpretable?
Yes, I did.
And what can you tell us about this?
Using a color change test, this item, which was leaves, gave chemical indications for the presence of blood. A complete DNA profile consistent with a male individual was obtained from this item. I was able to exclude K. Baker from this item. And it also, the DNA profile obtained from the leaves matched the DNA profile from Matthew Terry.
And again, did you assign a likelihood ratio when you determined that this was a match to the defendant, that his DNA is on this item?
Yes, I did.
And what is that likelihood ratio?
The observed DNA profile is greater than 700 billion times more likely to occur if the sample originated from Matthew Terry than an unrelated individual.
Can we get the item number?
This is State's Exhibit number 52, and on the package information, so it's HS 942586-1.
Yes, the witness's item number is at 5.
It is item 5.
Thank you.
Thank you.
1 second. All right, last one. I'm going to show you what has been admitted as State's Exhibit number 22. Take a look at this item and tell me if you read an item you perform work on.
Yes, I do.
Exhibit 22. Do you recognize this based on the lab number, your handwriting, the date, those sorts of things?
Yes, I do.
Anything about it suggests that it's been tampered with, molested, or otherwise contaminated?
No.
I'm going to very briefly show the jury State's Exhibit number 27E. And now I'll show the jury State's Exhibit number 22, which is marked as the swab of the right hand of Matthew Terry. Were you able to obtain results from this item?
Yes, I was.
Were those results interpretable?
Yes, they were.
Did you perform the same process and procedure that we've talked about before, where you use heat and chemicals to extract the DNA, you then run it through your instrument, it generates numbers that you can then analyze, so on and so forth?
Yes, I did the same process.
Did you walk through all the same steps that you talked about to make sure that you're not contaminating this, wearing your lab coat, your face mask, wearing your gloves, your hairnet if necessary?
Yes.
Was there anything about the way that this item was received from the sheriff's office and then kept at FDLE before it was physically turned over to you that suggested in any way it was something unusual, different, that would have disturbed the chain of custody or the sanctity of the object?
No, it didn't.
All right, so let's talk about this item. Did this item give the chemical indication for the presence of blood?
Yes, it gave the chemical indications for the presence of blood.
Was there a mixture of at least 2 people's DNA on this item?
The DNA results from item 1 demonstrated the presence of a mixture consistent with 2 donors, including at least 1 male contributor.
And again, you use the word consistent with 2 donors. Explain what that means, because you use those words specifically.
So the DNA profile that I obtained, the mixture, looks like DNA from 2 people. So I can say it is consistent with 2 people. I know it's not from 1 person because I can see DNA from 2, and there was no indication of a 3rd contributor.
You have previously told us that sometimes you can determine whether or not there is a male contributor to the mixture. Could you determine that here?
Yes, there was at least 1 male contributor in this mixture.
All right. So of this mixture that's consistent with 2 donors, at least one of whom is male, did you compare Kay Baker to see if she was a possible contributor?
I did hear K. Baker, yes.
And did you compare the defendant to see if he was a possible contributor?
Yes, I did.
So this is the defendant's hand. Would you reasonably expect the defendant's DNA to be on his own hand?
Yes, I would have.
Was he included as a possible contributor to the mixture that was taken from his right hand?
Matthew Terry was included as a possible contributor to the mixed DNA profile from item 1.
Can you tell me the likelihood ratio that you assigned to that?
The observed mixed DNA profile is greater than 700 billion times more likely to occur if the sample originated from Matthew Terry and an unrelated individual than from 2 unrelated individuals.
As to Kay Baker, could you tell me if Kay Baker was included as a possible contributor to the mixture that is identified as coming from the right hand of the defendant?
Kay Baker was included as a possible contributor to the mixed DNA profile obtained from item 1.
And did you assign an initial likelihood ratio to that result?
Yes, I did.
What was the initial one?
The observed mixed DNA profile is greater than 700 billion times more likely to occur if the sample originated from Kay Baker and 1 unrelated individual than from 2 unrelated individuals.
All right, but you again use the words greater than. Do you have an actual number greater than 700 billion that you can tell us as to the likelihood ratio that Kay Baker is a contributor to this mixture
Yes.
on the defendant's right hand?
Yes, I do. Sorry.
What is that number?
So the actual number is 5.8 trillion.
It is 5.8 trillion times more likely that this sample came from Kay Baker and someone else than if it came from 2 unrelated people.
The sample is 5.8 times, given the evidence, it's 5.8 times trillion more likely to occur if the sample originated from Kay Baker, an unrelated individual, than 2 unrelated individuals.
Mr. Diaz, is now a good time?
I just have a couple questions and I'll be done. I got just 2 minutes. Ma'am, can DNA tell us how somebody's DNA gets on somebody's hand? Can they tell us the circumstances it occurs?
No, it cannot.
Can it tell us the time when that occurs?
No, it cannot.
That is a limitation of DNA as a whole, right? That's nothing specific to this case, is it?
It is nothing specific to this case. It can't tell how it got there or when.
I have any other questions, Your Honor? Thank you.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, I told you I'd get you to lunch before 12:30, so we're going to go ahead and break for lunch. We'll come back after for the cross-examination. Please do not discuss this case amongst yourselves or with anyone else. Please do not do any research related to this case, and please avoid any reports of this case outside of the courtroom. Please have a nice lunch. I'll give you an hour and 15 minutes, so that is 1:45. We'll pick up where we left off. All rise for the jury.
So, guys, I'll be back at 12:45 Central Time, where we can pick up on the cross-examination of this DNA witness, and then hopefully after that is the girlfriend, what we've all been waiting to see. So I hope to see you guys all back then. Have a great lunch. Just look for the thumbnail. I'll just put part 2 on it. So see you then. Bye, everybody.
From my side before we break for lunch.